That's the latex core, the latex molding of core number 7. But the crazy thing is, too, this is the only core that's really been analysed. Like, these things, they're all over the place. Like, lots of museums have them. I'd love to see a body of work be built up with true analysis of it, because...
Do they all have similar markings on them?
Well, yes. And so you can see the holes on a lot of the sites that seem to have a very clear striation on them. Some of the tubes, the actual drill cores, if you like, seem to have it that way. There were other techniques used. So the argument that how the mainstream archaeologists describe them solving this problem is they had a copper tube and they got sand and they put a rock on top of the tube and a bow drill and they just went back and forth with this. And they did some experiments and grinding works ultimately because sand has little chunks of like quartz and corundum in it, but it takes days and days and days to cut this much.
Right.
And the markings and the machining doesn't look anything like what you see in the ancient examples. And what's more, and what's kind of interesting here is that the drill cores that they found, they're tapered. So they taper in like this. The holes are straight, the cores are tapered. So it means that the tool itself must have had almost like a cone shape. And the thing because some people say, well, those lines could have been created when the tool was removed. And I'm like, no. If you think about a tapered tool like this, the second you take any pressure off it, the whole tool removes itself from the surface of the stone. So those marks can't be made by withdrawal of the tool. It's 100% something going on. And Petrie, back in the late 1800s, was scratching his head looking at this stuff, and he goes, there must have been a weight of 2 or 3 tons on one. Like he sort of said it was a jeweled tube of bronze that did this. But he was looking at it. He knew a mystery when he saw it, and he couldn't explain it.
What's the speculation? Like, what's the wildest speculation as to how these things were made?
Well, I'm pretty convinced that there was there's obviously saws and tube drills that are powered by something. Now, I think it may not just be pure friction. There might be ultrasonics involved. One of the whole interesting things I like about this space is it's like, and this has to do with even like the energy stuff that Randall was talking about that he's coming to talk about as well. There are realms of science that sit outside of our understanding. We'll know more tomorrow, in 10 years, in 1,000 years about science. So I think when we look at some of these things in the past, we should be open-minded enough to consider the possibility that some of the answers may sit outside of our current perspective, because our tendency is to look at it all and try and how would we do it?
Right. Does anybody have wild speculation that you've entertained?
Yeah, I think so one of the topics that often gets mentioned here is like ultrasonic drilling. So having it resonate at a frequency that matches the native frequency of the rock and sort of separating the rock more easily. And that's a technology that we're developing. Like, we do some ultrasonic drilling like this today with jewelry and stuff, and you literally vibrate, you find the correct vibration, you can put like a little star-shaped bit through a stone. They do it in like small work. I've seen lots of examples. And if you turn off the machine, it's like Excalibur stuck in the stone. You can't get that thing out. Like, you need that vibration to go through it. Plasma, you can even go as far as, well, they were softening the stone somehow with some molecular technology. Speculation like that. I would also say that some of these examples of technology and machining extend way up to these massive objects. Like, you have 1,000-ton single-piece objects that also exhibit some of these signs of precision engineering. So you might be talking about some truly giant machines that made them. Giant columns and statues and things like that.
And what do conventional archaeologists say when they're confronted by all of this data, the pottery, the vases, this stuff that you're looking at here? What do they say?
Well, you either just get a denial and they won't address it, and you get dismissed as just being ridiculous pseudo archaeology fantasy theory type thing, or in the case of the tube drills, for example, they will. And it's a funny story because they will argue that no, it's not spiral. The grooves on that thing aren't spiral. And in fact, in the textbook, this is what Chris Dunn found out. In the textbook where they do try to address the engineering with that tube drill, they took the photo of the tube drill and they just tilted it just a little bit. So when you look at it on the page, the lines look horizontal. It's literally in the textbook.
Oh, they fucked with it in the textbook?
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
They altered the photo because if you admit that tube has a spiral groove on it, now you're admitting that they're cutting into that granite at a ridiculous rate, and you can't do any of that stuff with any of the primitive tools. It has this flow-on effect that just knocks over this house of cards that says all this stuff was built with primitive technology, and our whole concept of the ancient Egyptians is off. Now, I don't think it's... I think the dynastic Egyptians, they used primitive tools. I think they just inherited a lot of stuff that's potentially a lot older. You know, and the proofs in the puddings with these vases, for example, that stuff, those things disappear from dynastic Egypt after the third, fourth dynasty. They don't make them anymore. They make alabaster vases.
Is that a tool?
That's a fantastic example of what I would call an out-of-place artifact. It's a hollow tube of lapis lazuli, which, by the way, there's no quarries for lapis in Egypt. The closest one's probably in Afghanistan. Came from Gebel Tariq, found in a pre-dynastic site. It's hollowed. It's perfectly made. This is a very difficult thing to achieve, even with modern machinery. And it's displayed in a cabinet next to what? Bone and beads. Right?
And what is that? What is that supposed to be? That tube?
It's something decorative, I assume. It has a gold sheath, but it's a hollow tube. I actually have pictures of it from the end on, not probably in the ones you have, Jamie, but yeah, hollow tube. It's an out-of-place artifact. Like these things from hard stone, and these are more examples. Rock crystal, obsidian gourds and vases that show just perfect, just very high degrees of sophistication.